The Undertaker is inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022. Plus, we have the winner of the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale as WrestleMania weekend kicks off with WrestleMania Saturday tonight, live on Peacock. All this and more in today's WWE news. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into today, and I'm going to try and keep this one as short as possible because I feel like the news doesn't really need to be said. Everyone's just excited about WrestleMania, right? Everyone's excited about WrestleMania Saturday, WrestleMania Sunday. We will be doing a watch long and a post show, so be sure to subscribe, bottom right hand corner, click the notification bell. You'll be notified when I go live for both shows this evening. But let's start off talking about The Undertaker. The Undertaker, of course, was the headline attraction as he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame class of 2022 last night after SmackDown at the American Airlines Center in Dallas, Texas. I thought the whole, Hall of Fame induction ceremony was great. It was long. It always is long. I sympathize for those people who are competing tonight on WrestleMania Saturday and, frankly, NXT Stand and Deliver, right? Because NXT Stand and Deliver's early today, and that Hall of Fame ceremony went well until midnight last night Eastern time. So it was a long one. Taker's speech was a long one. You know what? I've seen some people, I'm not going to say who they are, but I've seen some people on social media commenting saying, The Undertaker didn't mention this person, or The Undertaker didn't mention this person, or The Undertaker had great matches with this guy and he didn't mention them in his speech. First of all, it really doesn't matter. That's one thing. Two, because it's not about you. It's about The Undertaker. It's The Undertaker's speech. He can do what he wants. Imagine that. Imagine the nerve of a guy who has been wrestling for over 30 years, finally goes into the Hall of Fame in his home state, and your biggest takeaway from it is, he didn't mention this match. He didn't mention it. Come on. Like, seriously. And again, I mentioned it just a second ago, the guy has been wrestling for 30 years. Think of the amount of opponents he has faced. Think about the legendary matches he has faced. If he names every single one of them, he would still be doing his speech right now and at the end of WrestleMania Sunday. It would be that long. So he didn't need to. His speech was long enough anyway. I was shocked by how long it was. I get that, the headline attraction and the person that's, the main inductee, the headline inductee or headlines the Hall of Fame class always has a longer speech, but it was a long speech and it was unusual because it was less of a speech, more of a TED talk, it felt like, because whilst you can see in the picture right there that there's a microphone that every other inductee used on the podium, The Undertaker didn't do that. He wasn't, I guess, comfortable, didn't feel comfortable in just talking into the microphone. He wanted to walk around. He wanted to talk. So he had the whole microphone deal on the side of his face and he was telling stories. He thanked, obviously, his family and spoke about some opponents and some friends and some people he's close to, but he couldn't mention everyone. And again, it's not about them. It's about The Undertaker. If your biggest takeaway from watching that speech is, I can't believe he didn't mention so-and-so, then I don't think you get it. It's not about it's not about that. And I'm sure The Undertaker would have wanted to mention every single person he could have, but he can't. That speeches have times. And again, it was long enough as it is. So it was about The Undertaker. And it was what was, I think, really sort of, staggering is, The Undertaker was obviously emotional, as you would expect he was, but he got what is, he's rare. He's that level of respect that he has is that when he came out, he stood there and he had a standing ovation that must have gone like 4 or 5 minutes without him saying anything. Just applause, cheers. It kind of reminded me. You remember the Hogan when it was it the Raw after? It was a couple. It was either the Raw after or a few episodes after WrestleMania 18. I think he might have been. He might have been in Canada. He might have been on the SmackDown or something like that. He just came out there and he didn't say anything, and the crowd cheered for him for just 10 minutes. He didn't say anything. They just were cheering because they were just happy to see him and so thankful. And it's kind of like that with The Undertaker last night. He didn't even say anything, and the crowd just. They just adored him. And can you blame them? You can't. So I thought the speech was great. It's still wild, honestly. It's still wild because The Undertaker, so protective of kayfabe for so long and so in character. And I know we've kind of got a little bit numb to it at this point because he's been out of character for what? 2 years maybe-ish, about 2 years, 3 years. He's been out of character doing interviews as Mark Calloway as opposed to The Undertaker. And look, he did his induction speech as Mark Calloway. He said, look, I'm going to let you know who Mark Calloway is. And he was speaking to the audience in that way. And it's frankly a bit of a groundbreaking moment, because even when he was the American Badass and all that kind of stuff, and Big Evil and Dead Man Inc., and he was, not playing the dead man, if you will, he was still a character and he was still in kayfabe somewhat. And he was Mark Calloway. It's the first time we've seen really Mark Calloway in front of the WWE fans and in front on WWE programming. So it was really significant. But the thing I will say is, so if you're not aware, it ended with The Undertaker said thank you, and now that he's in the Hall of Fame, he will rest in peace, blah, blah, blah. And he's walking down the steps to get out the ring, and he stops, and he turns, and behind him in the ring, they'd set up several Undertaker costumes throughout his, or attires throughout his career, sort of signaling several decades of The Undertaker. So there was, sort of the one in the Attitude Era, where I think he wore maybe WrestleMania 14 or something like that, there were different hats and different coats and jackets and all that kind of stuff. And he's walking down the steps and he stops and he pauses and he turns back around. And as he turns around, he goes up to one of the coats and one of the jackets rather and hats, and he puts the jacket on and he puts the hat on. And before he leaves, he says, "Never say never." And he leaves dressed as The Undertaker. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know. I think that this is the thing. If you've watched the Last Ride documentary, you know that it gets to this time of year, usually January, and he kind of said that he was at the Royal Rumble in January. He was at the Royal Rumble in January. He was there supporting his wife, Michelle McCool. She was in the Women's Royal Rumble. And he got there, he felt the atmosphere, he felt the road to WrestleMania, and he was like, it's tough. He's a junkie, he's an addict, he loves it, and it's 30 years of it, and it's difficult to not, get into that. And the issue is with The Undertaker, and I think I've said this before, I always felt this in the back of my mind, that The Undertaker's a guy that I feel like previously he was always looking for a reason to come back, right? If you watch the Last Ride documentary, you kind of really understand his thought process when it comes to this. He was looking for that perfect ending, that perfect match, that match where he could go, yes, that was it, that was perfect, that's the way I want to go out. And he was just having string of bad matches because he was older and he couldn't do it. It was an oxymoron. I want to have that perfect match, but as I get older, my matches are getting worse. So how are you going to have that perfect match? And who knows if he had had that match with AJ Styles at WrestleMania 36 in front of a live audience, would it have been as good as the Boneyard match? Chances are no, because it would have been a proper wrestling match. I mean, AJ Styles is great, but especially in what WrestleMania was going to be that year as well, that was still in the time where it was a one-day event, and it would have been at the Buccaneers Stadium, Raymond James Stadium, and it would have probably been 6 or 7 hours like the WrestleMania the year prior. And whenever The Undertaker and AJ Styles went on, the crowd would have probably been tired and quiet, and the match would have been, The Undertaker falling down in his late 50s and, and with bad hips and all that kind of stuff, and probably wouldn't have been as good. Boneyard match was great. The shows were shorter. It was cinematic. The pandemic had just hit. Everyone was at home and they wanted something to sort of buy into and believe in, and it was great. And cinematic matches weren't overexposed at that point, and all of it was just fantastic. So we got the perfect ending. But in the same way that he does throughout the entirety of the Last Ride documentary, I just wouldn't be shocked if in the back of his mind he's thinking, I tell you what, it was a great ending, and maybe I can't do better than that, but there was no crowd there. There was no crowd at that match. And not just that, that's one thing, but there was also no crowd when he retired. When he had his 30th anniversary at Survivor Series. There was no crowd. And there is just, I would be shocked if he hasn't had that conversation. And when he says never say never, well, we know he's going to be appearing on WrestleMania, right? He's going to be appearing at WrestleMania because every year they do the Hall of Fame. These are your Hall of Fame inductees, and they go through the list. The Undertaker will do his big entrance, I'm sure. Does that lead to a match? I mean, even seeing him walk down the ramp looked slightly painful, honestly. And I really, as a fan, despite how great the Boneyard match was and there was no crowd, I really have no interest in seeing him have another match, honestly. And I don't even know who it would be against at this point. Maybe it would be AJ Styles again. I look at the roster and I say, who else? Realistically, who else would it be? I don't know. I couldn't see that. So maybe it would be the match that AJ wanted to do again. I'm not sure, but I don't really have any desire to see that, honestly. And maybe it was just a case of a bit of mystique. But look, Sting, when he retired and he was put in the Hall of Fame, and, was retired against his will because of his neck issues. But when he was put in the Hall of Fame, he said the only thing for sure about Sting is that nothing's for sure. And that was his catchphrase, but he's wrestling. He's wrestling at the moment. So when The Undertaker says never say never, don't rule it out. That's all I will say. Do not rule it out. I wouldn't be shocked. Honestly, I would not be shocked. Last night was WrestleMania SmackDown on Fox. And honestly, for a WrestleMania go-home show, nothing of really significance happened. I think the days of big angles happening in the go-home shows, they're over because it's not necessary anymore. They used to do big angles on the go-home show for, say, WrestleMania or any pay-per-view because they needed you to buy the pay-per-view. They were trying to encourage you, buy the pay-per-view. The pay-per-view, if you've got a subscription to Peacock, it's already bought, and the pay-per-view sells itself, frankly. So I think that's why last night, again, was really nothing of substance. And I think also WWE, they're conscious, like we don't want anyone to get hurt or anything like that. But I remember the go-home Monday Night Raw for WrestleMania 18 was The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin versus the NWO, their first match as a collective in WWE, their only match as a collective in WWE of the original 3 members. And that was a go-home show to sell pay-per-view buys. And it don't work like that anymore. It just doesn't. But on the show, we saw the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royale, and it was won by Madcap Moss. Moss got the victory. He last eliminated Finn Balor to get the win. I mean, the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal means nothing, honestly. It was a vehicle. Initially, it was a vehicle to get people over and to have an annual event, and I think it was created in good faith. Cesaro winning it the first year felt like a big deal, but after that, it was a vehicle to get people on WrestleMania. It's not even on WrestleMania anymore. I'm not shocked. I know a lot of people are like, what? Finn Balor didn't win or Damian Priest didn't win? I'm not shocked, honestly. I still think we could see Finn Balor versus Damian Priest at WrestleMania. We've got 2-hour pre-shows both nights. They've got time to fill. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's announced. When it comes to Madcap Moss, I'm not surprised. They've been big on Riddick Moss for a really, really long time. I mean, we're talking at least 2 years or so. I remember right after it was Super Showdown 2020, right before the pandemic, Riddick Moss was the 24/7 champion. And I know you'll say, oh, but he's 24/7 champion. How does that mean they're really high on him? Look, he's got a great look, obviously. He's got an athletic background, former football player. And Ricochet had just faced Brock Lesnar. Remember when Ricochet was facing Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship at a Saudi show? Remember that? That feels like an alternate universe. But, Ricochet lost in about 10 seconds. It was ludicrous. Nevertheless, he just wrestled for the 24/7 championship just days prior, right? Just days prior. And he had a match on Raw against Riddick Moss for the 24/7 championship. And most people, including myself, assumed, well, he was just wrestling Brock Lesnar. So, obviously, you would think that Ricochet's going to win here and they're going to continue this momentum. Riddick Moss beat him in like 3 minutes. Now, Riddick Moss had to kind of go away during the pandemic because I think he's a carer or he's got someone close that was immunocompromised and he wasn't comfortable and all that kind of stuff. But they're very high on him. So I'm not shocked. I'm not shocked that he won that. And, usually after WrestleMania, you get an occasional random person gets a post-WrestleMania push. We saw people like Jinder Mahal in the past. Like, wow, I did not see that coming. Don't be shocked if Madcap Moss gets a big push post-WrestleMania. Honestly, I would not be shocked with that. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below. Be sure to like and subscribe to Wrestling News 365, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right-hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.